All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this lovely Friday evening. I know it means a lot to me that anybody does anything on Friday night besides hit the bars. So you are at Asian Arts Initiative, though of course we are meeting virtually. That notwithstanding, we acknowledge that even in virtual space, we are but stewards on land that was forcibly taken from the Lenni Lenape people. So first want to acknowledge where we're at in that context. I'm very excited that at Asian Arts Initiative, we are endeavoring to create a better acknowledgement of land, and also by providing more space in a building which we actually own, free and subsidized for any artists who identify as Indigenous or are working in issues around indigeneity. If that describes you, if you know folks who could benefit from some space, studio space, please let us know. This is a new initiative for us and we're very excited to be supporting our peers in this way. Asian Arts Initiative is a community-based arts organization founded in 1993, and it was actually a response to social and civil unrest, and really in answering some questions in the 90s around how Asian and Black artists could support each other specifically. So we started as a poetry coalition. I'm so excited that those intersections are still so completely relevant today, and I've said this multiple times, but the synthesis of our work, I'd prefer to keep thinking about how we show up for each other, and it can be the simple act of sharing space, breaking bread, just talking, and it can be as profound as working together in the uprising and in the movement toward justice. So this is all going to lead into deeper conversation around two books, but really the communities that those books represent. We are here. Actually, sorry, I forgot. I'm supposed to plug a few things and give a little some ground rules. So if you are joining and would like to ask a question, there's a Q&A area. I think there's a chat area, but we'll respond most assuredly if you drop a question in the Q&A. The way that this event is going to roll out, I will introduce everybody briefly and then disappear while I let each of the groups talk about their respective projects and their communities. And then I will facilitate a return to a conversation that I hope just kind of happens naturally. I have a very strong feeling that will happen. And then we'll open it up to the rest of the audience for general Q&A. Also, Asian Arts Initiative currently about to open its ecosystems show, so please look out for those events. And the next one will actually be a seed exchange and storytelling circle next Tuesday. Yeah, very excited, where we will have panelists working in land-based initiatives, people such as Owen Wilson at True Love Seeds and Ashley Gripper of Land-Based Johns. And I'm London from Viet Lead, Sonia Galabar, lots of amazing people working in horticultural and social cultural intersections of the Black and Asian diasporas in America. So really, really excited. Come with your seeds or no seeds, and you're welcome to leave with. If I say seeds too many times, it starts to sound creepy, so I'm going to stop there. But next Tuesday, and then our visual exhibition opens March 4th, and that will be at 1219 Vine Street. So please do check that out. All right, so why are we here? We actually started this conversation many months ago when Asian Arts Initiative was really trying to unpack mutual aid. What is a mutual aid? How do they succeed? Why are they so successful? And actually, we started to feel a little weird about the phrase mutual aid, as it had started to become a little bit like social media jargon, right? Like people just kind of saying mutual aid to refer to kind of a lot of things. But really, when you zoom out and think about what it is, it's care, right? It's really mutual caregiving and caretaking. And the aha moment happened actually when I read Collective Courage by Jessica Gordon-Nembhard, Professor Gordon-Nembhard, and just how communities of color, and especially the enslaved African Americans and Asian Americans in forced migrations, had to come up with cooperative solutions in the absence of any support from the state, period. So then it just turned into this other conversation of like, well, how have we been showing up for each other? And so that's really the conversation that was instigated by this closer look at the phrase mutual aid. So then Dave, our director of programs, who's moderating this event, let me know that there was an amazing book coming out, an anthology of essays and stories called How We Stay Free. And I can't wait to hear Chris Rogers and Fajr Muhammad talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then they will introduce collaborators, and hopefully maybe more of them will show up in the audience and we can let them in on the chat as well, right? Yeah, let's keep the doors wide open. Absolutely. So without further ado, oh, and also we'll post a link up on the chat of where you can find the books. An important collaborator here is Malav Kanuga from Common Notions Press, who published the book and who runs Making Worlds Books, which is so great. So definitely check them out. And all that information is going to show up on your screens for audiences. And now I'd like to introduce our first speakers, Chris Rogers from the Robeson House and Fajr Muhammad, his co-editor of How We Stay Free. All right.
Just want to say, thank you so much to the Asian Arts Initiative for the invitation. Excited for the collaboration. Actually, a book just came out a little bit earlier about the Robeson's relationship with the Asian diaspora. And so we got more to talk about soon. But I'm Chris Rogers, the program director at the Paul Robeson House Museum. And I'll give a second for my co-editor to introduce herself as well.
I'm Fajr Muhammad, writer and editor, and also advisory board member of Blue Stew.
And as we get started today, we're talking about the new publication, How We Stay Free, Notes on the Black Uprising. And as we get started, it's important that I think we take care of some business with the dedication. So we open up the collection with a crowdsource dedication, which we invited all of our contributors and community members to add. Particularly as we went through a very tough year in 2020, and it continues. I also have an addendum to add for tonight. And that dedication goes, the editors of this anthology, in solidarity with the community of contributors that made this project possible, offer this special collective dedication. We honor those who have transitioned, some in 2020, but also before, from whom we have inherited the struggle. And as I read the dedication, I'm not going to be able to go through all the names, but if someone comes to your mind, please lift up their name in the chat. I think it's important that we honor the folks who inspire us to do the work that we do. So that first one, we honor those who have transitioned, some in 2020, but also before, from whom we have inherited the struggle. Point two, we honor those who may be currently locked inside or standing trial, recognizing that our road to liberation is bound with their freedom. In point three, we lift up the names and lives of our next generation, those newly entering this world to whom we will pass the baton to continue the worthy work. And as I lift up, the dedication for today, I want to make a special acknowledgement for, we had one of the contributors to the collection, a long committed housing justice activist, Jennifer Bennett, some may also know her as Nadara Hood, transitioned yesterday, surrounded by family, surrounded by loved ones. And she's certainly on our minds, on our hearts. We recognize that over this weekend, we expect to see a lot of testimonies and tributes to her legacy. And also, I just want folks to be aware and be on the lookout for if there's any crowdfunding campaigns that might come across. I've been in conversation with Occupy PHA. If anything comes out, I'll make sure to share it if it happens during this call. But just thank you. And the project in itself, How We Stay Free, as part of Paul Robeson House Museum, was really like a moment for us to figure out what do we do as an arts and cultural institution in this moment where we're facing the COVID pandemic, but also the persistence of a racial injustice and state violence in our communities. How can we think about what the Robesons would do in that moment? We know throughout their lives, they were always there to lift up the strategies and people on the front lines of movement work. And their art and what they put forward in the world was always connected to that deeply. So this collection, How We Stay Free, Notes on the Black Uprising, was our ability to say, how are we accountable to Black-led organizing in Philadelphia? How can we highlight the lessons and strategies that come through those movements? And then how do we provide space for Black organizers of all ages and stripes to talk about their own work, talk about their own lessons, talk about the messiness of what it means to do liberation work. And it was a pretty lengthy process, and we have to say thank you to the Independence Public Media Foundation, who funded this endeavor through their Community Voices Fund. So we're extremely grateful for that. And then also Emma Eisenberg from Blue Stoop, who told us, like, hey, go for it, apply to this grant, do it. And then Common Notions, who said, hey, well, we were just like, yo, we could do this as a zine and get it out to our neighbors. They said, nah, the world needs to see this as a book. And they inspired us to go for the big international publication. And I think we're all so pleased with how it came out. But I want to pass to my co-editor to talk a little bit about the process of what it was like to put the book together before our guest tonight.
Well, thanks, Chris. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. Yeah, so I think, like Chris's point, like when we initially conceptualized the project, we just thought we definitely need to document the stories that are happening in 2020. It was such a flashpoint, a marker in a long, consistent movement, but we had no idea or thoughts about how we would do it, what it would look like. I think we initially conceptualized it as a website, right? We thought we could then like kind of aggregate all the stories, do an open call and reach out to the community to see who would submit, and empower people to be able to tell their stories in the way, in the vein that they wish to tell those stories. But I think very early on, we just thought, like, let's just go for it. Let's like reach out to as many folks as we know that are connected to the house, that Chris knows through his own education work and his own movement work, people that I know through Blue Stoop and through the writing community. And we got so much interest, so many people were excited or just intrigued to be able to document what 2020 meant from so many different angles and so many different vantage points. I just want to touch on a couple of the things in the editorial process that I think were just like beautiful moments that kind of really stewarded this project along. Very early on, we took a very liberal approach to storytelling. We didn't have any like hard parameters around what kinds of stories we wanted, the types, what genre, et cetera. We were very open. We knew we wanted to also include photography, and artistry and graphics in the book to also be able to tell the story from that perspective as well. And we also hosted open hours with the Robeson House through January 2021. This feels like, yeah, it's been 2 years. It's amazing to see the long trajectory of the project. But we hosted open hours all throughout January with people to come to the house virtually. We did everything virtually. And we just helped people to be able to think through, talk through, coach through their ideas, their thoughts. And then that ultimately kind of spurred into what we have here, which is the book, How We Stay Free. All of the contributors were so game to be able to tell their stories really authentically and truthfully. And we really encourage them from an editorial standpoint to be as open and honest and transparent about their own actions, about how those actions connect to the long history of radical liberation, radical movement work in the city, but also just the world at large, to all of the things that were taking place and have taken place since George Floyd. And I think the biggest piece, I think, was that looking at the project as a complete project now is just seeing that we were able to pull in all of those different narrative threads, right? We were able to pull in things about COVID. We were also to speak directly to mutual aid, to abolition work, to the protest, to the idea of coalition building. So one of the things I think that just is so strong about the collection is that every contributor was coming from a different space, but they're all just playing together. There are so many synergies between all of the different pieces. people make different appearances in different pieces and then within their own pieces. So ultimately, I think it really became a book that readers, organizers, non-organizers alike, supporters can kind of really enter into and make some space and some idea and conception about 2020, but then also think about what that work looks like carrying it forward.
Yeah, so we wanted to commit to kind of just a preview, just a small preview of what we do, because this event is really an opportunity for us to listen and us to learn too. So Charlyn and Jena, if you could cut your cameras on, I want to give you all your flowers before we pass the mic to y'all. All right. Hey, what up? What up? So all throughout the rollout of this project, it has been about us really uplifting the folks who are on the front lines, doing the work every day, doing the organizing, caring for folks. And I'm really excited for tonight's conversation because the two people we have here tonight exemplify that. And I've known Charlyn for quite a long time, and the evolution of creative community care driven projects has just been wonderful to see. The free brunch program. And I remember you just reminded us the other day, I'm also a doula. I've been birthing babies around Philadelphia for a really long time, and you also are the board chair at the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance. So like, this really is about like lifting up the work that you all do in this moment, right? And then Jena, I saw a post, I hope I'm not stealing it. Yeah.
It's okay. Go for it.
Right, I ain't gonna steal your shine, but you said 7 years ago I moved to Philadelphia, and all I wanted to do was cook food for grassroots organizers, artists, activists, and their families. And now I'm doing just that. And when I think about the Bunny Hop Network and the amazing, just like the spirit upon which y'all do that work. We just did a collaboration at the King Sesson Library, and one of the volunteers like pulled up in a truck and just, bagged 20 bags of groceries for us right outside the library. And it's like, here you go, make sure and get them to the community and call me back if you need anything else. And I was just like, the abundance that the work of Bunny Hop shows, the way that you think about, food systems, and the way you think about, and it's not just hunger, because you also got the Dykes and Whites program. Like, y'all also are thinking about a lot of different ways that we serve people's needs. So I would just like to say tonight, you're really making space for you all and putting this legacy and part of the long legacy that Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nembhard collects. So I'm really excited to pass the mic to you all to hear a little bit about how you were inspired by the project. I will say too, just quickly, that Corinne Martin, the photographer who's in the book, was the first person that said, y'all gotta tuck the Bunny Hop. You gotta bring Bunny Hop into this collection. And then Charlyn answered the call. We were 2 weeks away from finishing. And I think just as sort of like a great doula does, we had this moment where we're talking about grief and mourning within the book, a piece by Cassie Owens. And I reached out to Charlyn and say, like, we need something that can like really just give an entry point for people into this moment, because there are some moments of tension and grief. We don't want to, trigger anybody. And Charlyn was like, I'm on it, I got something, and put something together for us immediately. And also some music that we're going to get to the website too. So without further ado, I want to pass the mic to you all to hear about your work, to hear about your project, to hear about the work that you're still doing today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm going to cover kind of previous, so I'll go first, and I want you to bring it current.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Again, want to just honor the Lene Lenape ancestors that are holding us right now as we're in so-called Philadelphia, and call in. We called in our mothers, her mother Maurice and my mother Euclid, who are two of our strongest warriors and who taught us how to do what we do. So just gonna call them into the space and welcome you again to call in an ancestor whose spirit sort of enlivens you behind your work, your service work, or someone who you feel like you need to call in if you are working on being a receiver of help and service. Because for a lot of us, that's sort of a bridge that we also need to cross, is learning how to receive this care as it's presented and made available to us. I moved to Philadelphia back in 2008, and I had been a member of the Park Slope Food Co-op for a few years. You know, working in the back office, supported kind of taking things from, you know, what is it called? These things, you know, card catalog to digital, doing checkout, restocking, whatever. My first child was born in New York and kind of came up getting snacks from the co-op and, you know, that neighborhood vibe inside of the shop. When I moved to Philly, I was so excited to find out about Mariposa and kind of transferred memberships from the co-op in Park Slope to Mariposa. And the next thing that I was really interested in tapping into were like networks of parents, because I had a toddler and had another baby on the way. And, you know, I wanted to figure out how we could care for our kids together. And, you know, that desire and creating and knitting kind of the network and the cover inside of community with the people who with whom I built that, one of whom is a Philadelphia artist, Misty Soul, who is worth looking up if you're not familiar with her work. She's also an agroecologist and, you know, is definitely, please look up her work. Is a cooperator, excuse me, at heart as well. You know, that really kind of was my history here in Philadelphia. That's where I started. Having been a home birthing parent and serving as a doula for our small network of friends, then kind of expanded my practice into the community even more. And as Chris mentioned, I've been a doula for 13 years here in Philadelphia, assisting birthing families in hospitals and at home, in alternative, you know, birth center spaces. And I now, you know, work with our close network, you know, assisting with births as well. But went on to begin training doulas with the Maternal Care Coalition here in Philadelphia, who created a peer-led program, doula training program. And so then became a trainer of doulas. And now we have in Philadelphia one of the strongest peer doula training networks in the country. And it's so exciting and to see and to have been a part of growing that culture here. And another project here in Philadelphia that I've been a part of, I wasn't a part of its founding, but became a board member, as Chris said, of the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance. You know, that organization, kind of a network of co-ops, and that netting, again, that network that we've been able to net among community for needs that are sometimes, you know, they go unmet by the systems that we're told have been put in place to meet those needs. So I've just been really proud to welcome people in as, you know, COVID hit. Jena and my work initiated through the free brunch program, and which was my project from 2017, and then Jena's project, the 1149 Co-op, and her free breakfast program. And we pretty much like kept lifting each other up as high as we could go with these efforts around food for quite a while. And so we were kind of ready when COVID happened, when the shutdown happened, to respond and continue to do food distributions. I had to move west, and Jena stayed and created Bunny Hop and took off, and I'll let her talk more about that. But it is important to be able to mention and to cite the people who you do the work with. You know, that's a major part of the cooperation happening, is to be able to say, this is how it got done. I didn't do it by myself alone. You know, I was lifted by others. I was pulled sometimes by others. I was carried by others. And sometimes came kicking and screaming, being dragged, because it gets hard. It's work that, it's spirit work. It's whole body work. And so I think that, you know, I want to pass it over to Jena, but I think I want to say that, you know, the free brunch program, we're kind of, you know, follow us on IG. We've kind of gone into the depths of what the COVID pivot meant. And we went kind of digital with our convening. We decided that we were going to do mail order care packages. And then we became bunny hop bunnies when we came back to the East Coast, and we have a food distribution that happens in our neighborhood on 51st and Regent for those that are in Philadelphia. So I will say that project in particular is one that's, you know, continuing to emerge. But I think the biggest message that I wanted to share tonight was that COVID and the uprisings bringing so many more people into the folds of cooperation. And even if we wore the seams out of that phrase, mutual aid, it gave people language to go and look up and to define and redefine and continue to redefine with their actions. And I just want to say, like, a really heartfelt welcome to people who are finding themselves in this wave of mutual aid. Dr. Gordon-Nembhard, your work has been so pivotal, and PACA leaned on it heavily for our 20 for 20 book club years ago to inspire and ignite this region, and it worked, and we're leaning on it again now as we're wrapping up, or we've been leaning on it as we're wrapping up this last batch of study circles. And, you know, it's just, we're doing this together, and I'm so glad as we can welcome more and more people in as they can see themselves in a new light as cooperators, you know, naming what they've already been doing as cooperation and as mutual aid, but also as we feel strengthened to participate even more, you know? So a welcome from me, from us to you. We love you. You're welcome here. And yeah, I want to pass it to Jena to talk about Bunny Hop and where Bunny Hop's going.
Thanks, Charlyn.
I love you.
I love you too. And hello, everybody. It's really, I love these moments that we get to share together, even if it is across screens. I used to be pretty shy growing up, and I'm still a little reserved, but I'm pretty comfortable talking about the things that I do. So this is a great space for me to be in. You know, Chris mentioned I moved to Philly 7 years ago. I moved here from Austin, Texas. And when I moved, it was because I wanted to be around Black people, honestly. And I wanted to grow my then catering business to continue to serve organizers, artists, neighbors, and families, you know, and really connect to people across generations. That was something that I found to be really important to me that I was missing when I was living in Texas. And so I ended up in Philly. I moved here during a blizzard. Tuesday, it'll be my anniversary, my 7 years. So I'm really happy to be talking about this book, talking about the work we all do together. Like Charlyn said, I didn't do this work by myself. Bunny Hop came on the heels, shoulders of like so much work that happened before. I really felt like the year prior to COVID prepared me for these moments and these different patterns and changes that happen every 6 to 8 weeks with this work. You know, helped me understand that I could have a plan and, you know, I still wouldn't plan for everything, you know, and that is something that I found is really important to recognize when you're doing service in community, because you can't account for everything. And it's never going to be perfect, and you have to slow down. All the things that, are hard to do because maybe you see a need and you want to answer it, but you didn't think about that one detail that kind of will take you off track. So, when I moved here, that happened to me, and I learned that lesson again and again. And now I'm staying with that lesson and like understanding that I need to leave some space in all my plans and like ambitions to like leave room for the unknown. And I was really excited to be invited to be a part of How We Stay Free. I've always wanted to be able to document the work that I'm doing. And often the kind of work I do doesn't allow for me to sit and like write. It's very active. So this was a really good exercise for me, to just kind of think about how I got to the point where Katie and I launched Bunny Hop, and what kind of came thereafter during the uprisings, during a pandemic. And it really inspired me personally to like try to figure out how to do that with the folks we're partnering with now through mutual aid, with our fridges, with our neighbors who run distributions, and that's some of the work that Charlyn's also a part of right now. We're working on getting more of a resource guide together for folks who are interested in continuing the work. I recognized early on I couldn't do it. We couldn't feed the whole city even if we wanted to. It's really important that everyone understand that they have a stake in this, and that they can participate or initiate this work, whether they're in the smaller networks or events. Everybody has something to bring to the table. So I really enjoy being able to collaborate. Philly has been like like a bottomless pit sort of like opportunities to collaborate and come together. I've never felt pushed away from doing that. I've always felt held, and I want to continue to like offer that to folks who are just coming up or recognizing what they're able to do and share with their neighbors and with their families and friends. So this collection, this time we're having here today, and all the things that will happen thereafter, all a part of that. Everything that everyone's mentioned, like I've touched a bit, through cooking or through going to events or whatever. I helped with Dave, like organizing a meal kits for elders years ago at 1149. It's all just like really beautiful. And I think when people understand that it's possible, it opens up so much more opportunity for us to just kind of push back against the systems that are built to work against us. So I'm just so happy to be here, and to like share what we've been doing. We're going to be expanding on fridges as well as documenting this work in the next year, and just trying to continue to like push the envelope with how we support one another in community. So I just want to thank you all for being here and for inviting me in.
Thank you so much. I just want to call back in Chris and Fajr and just sort of let's talk a little bit more about this. And then I just want to quickly shout out Bunny Hop also for giving our storefront a lot of great guidance on how to manage a free pantry and kitchen for our audiences. And so little plug there, the Asian Arts Initiative Community Pantry and Storefront, really just learning so much from what y'all are doing. And so shout out to, because there's so many people actually involved in the work of a community fridge, right? Because we're all coordinating with each other to make sure resources are being distributed. Do y'all, Chris, Fajr, do you want to add things?
Well, the first thing I'll add is I know the seed exchange is coming up, and will y'all have Paul Robeson tomato seeds there?
Yeah,
Make sure that.
absolutely, yeah.
And additionally, I also wanted the whole, I figured this might come up towards the end, but I think because we are working with Asian Arts Initiative tonight, I know Charlyn has a really special event coming up.
Oh my gosh. Yes, so Sunday, I mean, it's Gena's too. It's so I am a fellow, a research fellow with Chronicling Resistance, which is a project of Free Library and Pascal, which is the Philadelphia area consortium of special collections libraries. And my research started with food and mutual aid because of my work with Free Brunch, and looking at the histories of mutual aid here in Philadelphia, Church of the Advocate and their pantry from back in the day. The Charles L. Bloxon collection at Temple has an amazing, amazing archive of documents from the Black food networks here in the 70s, 80s, 90s. And so it started there, but then it led me back to myself kind of to asking a question around Caribbean migration and like, how did people migrate from this region to the Caribbean and vice versa. And so on Sunday, I'm doing an offering at Golden Dragon Takeout. Follow them on IG also, which is another Asian and Black project and a food project. And they're also food workers that are deeply, actually an article just came out about them as well, that are deeply interested in kind of shaking the system up around food justice and talking about redefining what it means for people to be fed and for people to own restaurants and sell food. So on Sunday, I'm doing an event called Bacon Saltfish, which is a homage to my Caribbean upbringing. I'm Trinidadian and Guyanese. And as many people know, there's many Indo-Caribbeans. And so that's, you know, the Asian and Black relationship again there. And my grandmother was from Madras and, you know, came to Guyana by way of the Indian arrival. So, you know, we're again bridging that Asian and Black connection. And Bunny Hop is providing produce, and Golden Dragon's providing space and saltfish. And I'm gonna be in the kitchen frying up bacon saltfish. So you'll just come and eat. And we're gonna have a good time from 12 to 4. The food is completely free. You know, obviously, if people want to donate and share in the generosity, that's welcome, but it's going to be free. And we'll have some hot tea there as well.
Amazing.
I feel fed. I do. I feel fed. I just wanted to say one, thank you both for just the work that you do and also just your contributions. I think what you both talked about, it was really refreshing to hear, because I think we all worked furiously and behind computer screens at times to put together the collection. So it was never a time to just be able to step back and like actually hear about just the long trajectory of your work and like the inspirations and why you guys do the work. So it's been really beautiful to just sit back and hear. And Jena, you said something just about like the accessibility and the care, and I just like wrote in the chat, but I wanted to say this to you directly too, is that I felt like in working on your piece with you and helping to bring your story, I felt everything that you said in your words, in terms of like there was just such an intrigue in your story and the work that you do and why you came to start Bunny Hop. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, because I think that shines through beautifully in your piece and just also just yourself and your person.
Thank you. Thank you for all your help getting it together. I appreciate it so much.
Please stay tuned to the chat room as well, where we're dropping links for a lot of the people that have been named. And I just want to read this comment, so apt. Yaira, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. You know, when people are really about that work, when you ask them about their project and they start talking about all the other people around them doing the work, right? That's so apt right now. I feel I feel so small and so big at the same time. I love it. The world is very intimate, isn't it?
It's one thing we're gonna do is we're gonna name drop, okay?
That's right. That's right. I think that's a really lovely segue if we're ready to name drop the GOAT here. Right? Let's do this.
We're so excited for her.
I know. Yes. Professor Jessica Gordon-Nembhard. I don't even know where to begin. None of this work, well, our articulation of this work is really made possible by understanding the continuity, right? Where this comes from. And let me just give the formal introduction, and then I'll let you take over. Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nembhard is a political economist specializing in community economics, Black political economy, and popular economic literacy. And the book I just mentioned at the top, Collective Courage, A History of African-American Cooperative Economic Thought and Practice. This beautiful, actually accessible academic title, if I may say so, because I wouldn't just recommend something that was published from a UP without it being actually readable. But as I mentioned at the top of this, just so important in our understanding what the significance of these community systems is, maybe even seeing some of the beauty in the cooperative, right? That there's an actual culture inside of it, that not just systems. So I know you have a presentation prepared with some slides. So I'm so beyond honored to have you here to present. And without further ado, Jessica.
Thank you so much. Every time I come to Philadelphia, I get inspired and impressed, and feel like you should just listen to the other panelists and you don't need me, because everybody pretty much said everything. I'm just going to repeat it in a different way. But thank you for the welcome, and for feeling that I helped inspire you all. You all have inspired me. It's the work that inspires me. And so I just wanted to quickly, there we go, talk about some of this legacy and history that everybody keeps connecting. And also I want to do a land acknowledgement as well. I know we've already done it. I want to bring in our ancestors. I know we sort of already did that, but acknowledge my own and all of ours. Bring them into the room. Also welcome, acknowledge our elders, struggles of enslaved laborers, all those who continue to labor without just compensation, those who are struggling anti-Blackness and other forms of racism. And as you all have done, acknowledge our claim to land and resources, and acknowledge our history of resistance and using mutual aid and cooperation for liberation. So, we've talked around this, but one of the things when I started looking at cooperative history for African Americans, I realized that all populations in every era of human history on every continent use mutual aid, cooperation, solidarity in order to survive and thrive. And so those notions of the common good, the commonwealth, the commons, collectivism, in the Kwanzaa ceremonies, we talk about collective work and responsibility in addition to collective economics. All those things are really timeless. Indigenous peoples have used cooperative efforts, First Nations, early African civilizations. But really, as an economist, I can say mutual aid, economic cooperation, solidarity are actually our first economic systems. They're the first things human beings did in order to reproduce ourselves, to survive, to feed our families, to house ourselves. We worked together. We helped each other. We made sure not just ourselves, not just our families, but our clan and our neighbors were okay, had something if we had it. And so it's important for us to reclaim, right, that legacy, and to keep talking about that legacy, because we live in a world, right, racial capitalist world, that erases that memory and that alienates us from that understanding of economics and that sense of community and prosperity. So, we can recognize the informal as well as the formal economic solidarity that we practice every day. You heard so much about it already. I almost feel silly kind of trying to label it and talk about it when you already heard people who are living it and doing it. But, you know, some of the informal solidarity practices, barter, pooling of resources, any kind of beneficence and giving, mutual aid, right, helping each other in all different kinds of ways. And then just moving toward more formal, the revolving loan funds or rotating savings and credit, or the susus, which so many of our families practice and our neighbors practice. And then you can get into the more formal ways to cooperate economically. You know, actually, credit unions are actually financial cooperatives. The food co-ops people start to talk about, their electric co-ops, farm co-ops, producer co-ops, purchasing co-ops, healthcare co-ops, home care, childcare, craft co-ops. So really we've been able, and we do practice cooperation in every part of our lives, sometimes more obviously than others. But really we're always living some level of solidarity practices. And so I also like to make sure that, you know, when I talk, I remind people of the things that we do every day so that these things aren't so alien to us. But of course, you really heard that already from the other presentations. Here's the cover of my book, Collective Courage. And so I wanted to put the cover out there. You can get it from PSU Press. And also we just talked about, oh shoot, I forgot the name of the bookstore in Philly that you should get it from. And then I did want to mention that I did help Esther West when she was at the University of Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives to put together a current study of Latinx co-ops in 2020. And so if you're interested in that, you can see that. She talked a lot about similar things to what I did, that there's a lot where there was need for collectivity. You can find co-ops and cooperative ownership among Latinx people as well. I'm hoping that we can get more people studying Asian American cooperative and mutual aid work. And it sounds like, you know, the Asian Arts Group might be a great place to do a kind of a story or a collection on that. Looking, you know, for more groups to talk about subaltern cooperative economic development, the way all different marginalized groups have used cooperatives. So how did African American, what I focused my research on was African American cooperativism and the response to economic discrimination and marginalization by exaggerating and extending the kinds of solidarity and cooperativism that we always use, but using it more in the search for alternative economic solutions to address our marginality, discrimination, and absence and inequality. So we pulled together African retentions of caring for others, making sure we all, you know, not one rises, but we all rise, or notions of self-help, right? We have to do it ourselves with a group of us, even notions of voluntary segregation, right? We need to come together to take care of our own first. And then, you know, from that position of strength and caring, we can then move out into the rest of the world. So using all those kinds of different senses, along with just our sense of mutuality, we created co-ops and racially self-sufficient collective enterprises. This was a chance to design and manage needed services in culturally, racially, and geographically sensitive ways, so that we were able to address a lot of different issues, not just survival, but access to the kinds of goods and services that we wanted. And then we also took these collective activities to the next stage, and that next stage we actually looked toward liberation, right? To use the co-ops as a stepping stone to have real community control, real self-determination, stable prosperity, so that we could really make it, survive and make it, and do better than we had done. So we know also, or we don't know, but one of the things I found as I started to do this research was throughout all the long civil rights movement. What I mean by the long civil rights movement is every effort for African Americans to assert our civil and human rights, from when we were enslaved and first brought here in chains to now. There's always been this economic effort alongside this human rights, civil rights, political rights activity. And so it was interesting for me to find that as I was learning and studying and documenting the cooperative efforts and the mutual aid efforts, they were so parallel with the civil rights efforts. And often it was even the same people, even though in history books and media only talked about what they did, you know, for voting rights or for political rights or for a demonstration or something, and didn't talk about what they did economically. But often it was the same people who were also doing cooperative economics along with fighting for civil rights. And sometimes they were both arguing and practicing cooperative economics because they were being marginalized and retaliated against economically for their political and civil rights activities. And so the co-ops actually, again, saved them, helped them to survive the retaliation by allowing them, again, this mutual aid and this insularity, some protection from the outside world in that sense. So it's a really interesting combination of economic, social, economic, and political activity that when you read it all together, you see a strong, continuous movement of solidarity. And the other thing that I learned as I started to study this, actually I learned it after I started to try to explain it and put it all together, but some of the largest, strongest Black organizations promoted cooperative education and co-op development. And the periods of time in US history when we had the most Black organizations, the most Black co-op activity and the most Black co-ops and co-op development were the times when we had the strongest Black organizations who at least part of the mission of their organization was to do co-op development. So again, this real interesting combination between political, social organization, economic justice, and practice in economic democracy. I want to give you some quotes since you were already inspired by current people who are doing and practicing this. I also want to remind us, you know, even an intellectual and some people thought was kind of an elitist, W.E.B. Du Bois actually believed in, embraced, wrote about, and talked, gave lectures about and wrote editorials about the importance of cooperatives and African Americans engaging in economic cooperation. He actually wrote the only other book on this, full-length book on this topic in 1907. But in 1933, in an editorial in the Crisis magazine, he ends by saying, we can, by consumers and producers' cooperation, establish a progressively self-supporting economy that will wield the majority of our people into an impregnable economic phalanx. And you're already, again, you see how that's happening in Philadelphia with the people who already gave you their stories tonight. But he was arguing, as you said, that we need to use cooperation. We need to be self-supporting as much as we can. We need to do things that will help the most number of people, right? And things that will protect us, right? Will give us strength and solidarity and stability so that we can do whatever else we need to do in the world. Then there's a Fannie Lou Hamer who also embraced cooperatives in addition to being a member of SNCC and, one of our icons in the voting rights movement. She actually, her last years of her life, she was doing cooperative development and started Freedom Farm in Mississippi. She gave a speech where she talked about cooperative ownership of land opens the door to many opportunities for group development of economic enterprises, back again to that group, to the majority of us, to develop the total community. Again, it's about the majority of us making sure we're all well, we're all good, rather than creating monopolies or monopolizing the resources. So, right, land ownership, cooperative answers to addressing all of our survival and thriving needs. And then also John Lewis, who also was a SNCC member and member of Congress, right, for about 30 years, I think, or more. He was a member of Congress, but he started out being a co-op developer. His early work in the 60s and early 70s was doing co-op development. And he talks about how, we won the right to vote, but we didn't have enough to eat. So what did we really win, right? So I often use his quote to talk about that we really need economic justice in order to achieve racial justice, right? Getting those civil rights, those political rights is not enough. We need more. And so he talked about his early job, helping people join together, right, to fulfill their needs. So again, it was about showing people that they could pool what they had, form a bank, a credit union, band together to buy groceries or feed or seed, et cetera. And so again, that pooling of resources, mutual aid, solidarity, cooperative economics. And so what has that achieved? pooling of resources, anchoring local resources in our own communities, providing quality goods and services in geographically sensitive and culturally appropriate ways, providing access to those kinds of appropriate goods and services, saving costs so then we could increase our incomes and wealth, saving or creating jobs, especially decent jobs in our own communities, increasing our own Black economic stability, self-sufficiency, group independence, self-determination. And being involved in cooperative economics develops our collective agency and action in general, not just in that one enterprise that we're doing. In fact, a lot of people end up being involved in more than one co-op activity. And I think you've seen that already too. It develops leadership and social capital, and also provides environmental sustainability and allows us to help steward the environment, steward land, steward our communities better, and take care of those kind of things. So I wanted to I think I have 3 or 4 quick examples, and then I'm really excited to go back to the dialogue we've been having and to talk with, as I said, the people who are living and doing this kind of work now. Freedom Quilting Bee started in 1967, Alabama. Sharecropping women. So if you know sharecropping, it's basically debt peonage of farm workers who were renting land, but always in debt to the landowner. They started a quilting co-op, realized that they could make some money selling their quilts. That's a picture of some of their quilts. They were so successful that they were able to actually buy land. So remember, these are sharecropping families, so they don't own any land at all. And in fact, they're in deep debt because they're trying to continue to farm on land that they don't own. But the co-op is now able, within a few years, they were able to buy 23 acres of land. They built a sewing factory there, and instead of sewing in their homes, they started sewing in their own factories that they owned. That meant they needed childcare and other children's provisions. So they ended up with a childcare program, an after-school program, a summer reading program for their children and the children of their neighborhood. The fact that they own land allowed some of their members and other sharecroppers to then lease land from them or buy land from them and no longer be sharecroppers. So the Quilting Bee served multiple issues at the same time. And they also were co-founders of the regional organization, the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund, which still exists today. And so again, you see all the combination of things, right? In this case, land ownership, sewing together, making a business out of it, addressing women's issues, family issues, being able to address issues about being retaliated against. In fact, some of the families were thrown off their sharecropping land because they registered to vote. And so the co-op was able to fill in for some of that. And some of these women actually, some of their quilts were part of the G's Benz exhibit that got into the Smithsonian, the quilting exhibit. So all those combination of things that the co-op helped to happen. I want to quickly mention the Black Panther Party because that's also a close connection to what's happening now. So right, 1967, also a start date in Oakland. This time, the Black Power strategy was used to defend Blacks against police brutality, but also to assert Black political and economic power, more community control. And so even though the party was founded to really be a defense against the physical assaults by police, they realized that was not enough. They argued for a need to radically restructure our society to eliminate racism and exploitation and state violence. And so they started cooperatives and mutual aid and other solidarity economic activities to help address that state violence, poverty, land loss, discrimination, unemployment, malnutrition, et cetera. And also economic retaliation against civil rights activities. So again, this creating enclaves and stable collective economic activity separate from the discriminating system that we were in. So they provided free breakfast programs, free health clinics. They had co-op bakeries, a co-op newspaper, a co-op shoe factory, pest control, transportation services for the elderly and for families to visit their children in prison or their family members in prison, things like that. So again, a whole economic solidarity system so that they could create the world that they wanted to live in, even while they were fighting against the world that they were living in. Something like what you Philadelphia people have mentioned. And then quickly, grain worker cooperatives in the South Bronx, right, is connecting, right, worker ownership with green business. So addressing the issues of climate change and the need to steward our environment and the need for environmental sustainable businesses with the need for worker-owned economic democracy in those businesses. And so here are some of the names of different co-ops that Green Worker has helped to develop, from, you know, artists co-ops and birthing co-ops, you know, green cleaning, compost, fashion, food, especially vegan food, interpretation, manufacturing, photography. So a whole range of things, but all using some kind of, you know, being a green business, all using some kind of sustainable, environmentally friendly activities. And then finally, food from the hood. Let's talk about getting young people involved. And I think that came up already in the presentations, but this would have been Crenshaw High School in the I don't have the dates here, but 1992, they started right after the uprisings against the Rodney King verdict. And these are students who first, one of their teachers taught them about doing a school garden over the summer vacation. And by the time they had produce, they realized they wanted to give it to the homeless and address some of the food insecurity problems in their neighborhood. They then learned about farmers markets and started selling their produce through farmers markets. But then they also started learning about business development and how to do value added. And so created a salad dressing, which they called Food from the Hood. I think they had 3 different brands, flavors of salad dressing. And in addition to selling them at the farmer's market and school, whatever, they also, this is when Amazon just started, they realized that they needed a more national platform and started selling through Amazon. They voted to save at least 50% of their profits for college scholarships, so that in 10 years, they had over about $180,000 in college scholarships were granted to their graduating seniors. That also led to the school creating a college prep program, because now they had young people who could actually afford, who had some money to go on to college. In addition, they had to keep training children younger than them, because they kept, these are high schoolers, so they kept graduating from high school. So they had a whole training program to bring more younger students into their co-op and training them, so that then when they graduated, the co-op kept going. So again, lots of different connections. And then I'll end with Cooperative Aragos in Puerto Rico, which is an artists co-op in the Guayama Penitentiary in Puerto Rico. They're actually on hiatus because of COVID right now, but they were operating for about 15 years. They had demanded co-op education because they realized they wanted to start a co-op to sell their artwork, and that's a picture of their artwork. They met with the governor at the time, and then the state assembly. They had to change Puerto Rican co-op law to allow incarcerated people to own and run their own cooperative. They won that change and were able to incorporate with an all incarcerated owner member group. And they worked with the corrections department in order to figure out how to use corrections computers and rooms and things like that, and pay them back for it, and also to allow the corrections to let some of them go out and sell their art to the co-op community, which supported them, that kind of thing. And so I'll end with a quote from one of the members who got out about, I think he got his sentence commuted about 15 or 20 years for good behavior once he joined the co-op. And he said, "I never imagined that working in a cooperative that I could find the ideal model to rehabilitate myself. I will say anywhere that the program with the co-op model changes lives, we are not the same after engaging in the co-op." And I think you've seen that example everywhere from all the stories that you've heard. It's my pleasure to add to some of that knowledge that you've gotten, but I really, I feel so moved tonight from the stories we heard earlier. It's great for me to be able to say, and they're on the shoulders of all these other kinds of activities that have happened. And I need to stop sharing. I think I did, right? Did I stop sharing? Yes. So I hope I stated my time. I hope I didn't go too far over my time period. And I hope I didn't talk too fast. I'm sorry, I'm a New Yorker, so.
I'm really glad you had slides. I will say that. I was furiously writing down notes.
Oh, I can share the slides if you want. That's not a problem.
Please. Oh my God, yes. So much information, and thank you. That was not nearly enough time, but can I invite the other panelists to get back on screen and we'll all chat? Yay. I'm floored. There's just so much great information here, and I'm just really inspired. And I want to make sure we have an open conversation between folks. I have some animating thoughts and questions if we need that. I'm going to be the executive and go ahead and insert myself with a question to start. But
I have a question when you come to me. I have a question for the other.
Oh yeah. Well, why don't we start with you? Mine is just yeah.
Okay. Well, mine is just, I don't know if any of you want to talk about it, but especially those of you who told your stories about, engaging in mutual aid and cooperation. What made you think to do it that way, right? I mean, a lot of people, and especially in this world, society of ours, the first thing people think of is, I'm going to do it on my own, right? I'm just going to go, have my lemonade stand or whatever, make my money and run or whatever. But you guys said, I'm going to do something with other people and for other people. So can you just talk about sort of why you decided to go that way and, what you were thinking?
Gina was waiting for me to stop chewing before she unmuted us.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Oh, do you want me? The work that I started before I moved to Philly was community focused catering, and it was always sliding scale. So there was always the idea of making it accessible, and then got to Philly, started doing that. Then 1149 happened, and I really was upset about bargaining about feeding people all the time, honestly. Going back and forth, and also always knew in my mind that I wanted everyone to be able to eat what they're able to eat. I always tried to have different menus for people, so people with different needs were able to eat, and then that just expanded to free breakfast, which, for me was inspired by my knowledge of Black Panther history. And when 1149 closed and my mother passed, and I didn't really want to cook for anyone, but I still knew people needed food, it kind of just shifted from wanting to sell food to just free food distribution. And also in my time working as a caterer, I learned to accept help. I definitely started off doing things on my own, but someone was always a part of that with me. And I learned, to accept and ask for help, and then learned that it was a lot easier to just be open to that. So when Bunny Hop started, I had already had a network of people I had been working, collaborating with. I was a part of PACA 2 at that time. And so, yeah, I just wanted to keep building on that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I think that my mom and I'm an immigrant. My mother migrated twice to get to the US. And so what I knew about family was really defined by the fact that my mom lifted her whole family and moved them to the US to be near her mother. And we ended up living really close to my grandmother and my aunt, and my cousins, and my mom had a garden. And I remember my mom was a single mother, and I remembered that my mom would basically barter with people in our neighborhood because we would need someone tall to do something, or someone to look at her oil or something. And so she grew food in our yard. she would send me, I have a basket of hers somewhere. She would send me with this basket full of tomatoes and peppers. She would say, okay, go to Miss Price and go over to Mr. John over here and go and take them their stuff. I have this for them. I must give them this now, because they had done something for us before, or maybe their kids had. So a lot of it was those original experiences. In childhood, my first work was babysitting, and it was babysitting kids in my neighborhood. And I remember like the parents not only paying me, but my looking out for my mom, you know, asking what she needed in order to let her child go and work for them. You know, there was just such a togetherness. So I think that was my first kind of witnessing of how life goes. And so that's just how it went for me. And I would kind of understand early with friendships that like where I was giving and giving and giving and not receiving anything, that wasn't right. You know, I think Jena and I really kind of fell in love and friendship through realizing how reciprocated the energy was here, and how the reciprocation was so that she could be of service to others, and the reciprocation was so that I could be of service to others. And that's just been beautiful. Also, you know, the Panthers obviously, you know, inspired the free brunch program. And that, you know, that has just been this convergence of like art and homage to, you know, those that came before. But I live in a cooperative house also, you know, it's kind of just a whole lifestyle. It's a lifestyle once you hit a certain couple of years that you sort of, it gets in there, it becomes like genetic. You kind of are able to like free yourself of the genetic material of capitalism. Like your blood refreshes, and now you breathe, you can feel how you breathe with others, like you can feel the oscillation, you know, and it's, yeah, like, you know, each other's birth is each other's birth, like we share in all of it. Yeah. And we know when to take breaks too, because that's one of the things that is so essential, is knowing when to be like, I'm out, don't look for me, you know, and be able to strengthen and recharge to come back, you know, and be present and do that work. Yeah. Thank you for that question. How did you come to it, Jessica?
Yeah, good question. So I have to go back to my family. My parents were scholar activists, so they're both professionals and actually teachers, but they were also activists. So, you know, some of my earliest memories are picket lines and things like that, and hosting political people at the house and having political conversations at the dinner table and that kind of thing. My parents also believed in servant leadership. So they always believed you had whatever you had to give and share with other people, because that was the reason, right? If we had it and somebody else didn't, it was because we were supposed to help them. And so we always grew up with that notion that it wasn't good enough just to have something. You were supposed to give back and do something good with it to help the rest of society and to make the world better. So that sort of, you know, and I, for some reason, that really hit with me. Like I just always felt that mission, I guess that's the word, is that the right word? That I was supposed to do something with all the different gifts and luck that I had in life. So that's sort of the, I guess, the ideology and the heart part, in terms of, you know, I'm also very intellectual and have spent most of my life in academia or whatever. So on the sort of intellectual side, I felt like we didn't understand enough about how and why and when people do this kind of activity. And I wanted to become an economist because I was worried that, you know, we didn't have the right words or tools in what I was seeing people were calling economics to really solve these problems of inequality and poverty and that kind of stuff. And so I thought maybe if I studied it, I could figure out what was wrong. And so luckily, you know, there is a field of political economy and Marxism and now solidarity economics, which, you know, is just like 20 years old or whatever. But I realized I was fortunate enough to be able to get a PhD in economics, but also I had the right mindset to then become a heterodox economist and really think about what's the kind of economic analysis that would help us move further to really change things the way that my parents always said I was supposed to grow up and change things, or even not even grow up. Even when I was younger, I was supposed to help change things. So I got excited when I started learning about cooperative solidarity economics. And then when I started talking about to people, especially Black folks, they all gave me blank stares half the time. Like, oh, we don't do that. You know, hippies do food co-ops, but, you know, we don't, you know, do that. And it just didn't sound right to me. So then I was like, okay, I'm a researcher. Let me research, right? And so I started researching. I started asking people who I thought knew stuff and started reading things and looking into things. And I was like, because this, you know, this doesn't sound right from what everything I was told and how I grew up. People did work with each other and help each other and do things. And there must be some kind of trail, right? I must be able to document some of that. That was like, what, 30 years ago, 25 years ago now, and I'm still finding new things almost every day on this trail.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you, oh, Chris, this is kind of tied to what Dr. Jessica just shared.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm listening.
Real quick, about 10 years ago, I was invited to, well, a very good friend of mine, again, Cooperative, a friend of mine who was here in Philadelphia, Khadijah Sharif, who did a degree, her master's at UPenn. She moved back to Zanzibar. That's where she's from. Her family's from the Comoros and moved to Zanzibar a few generations ago. She moved back. She was like, it's time, I need to go back and give to my folks. And so Zanzibar was its own republic for some time, but it was destabilized and then, you know, brought into Tanzania's government, which has like gone between how many parties and whatnot. About 10 years ago, you know, when she moved, she was like, you know, when you come, like we can do some programs, you know, let's see what's going on. I would love for you to meet with farmers and talk about, you know, the work that you're doing and bring some of, and so I began to go to Tanzania, and for the COVID prevented me from going to Uganda in 2020, but I've been working with Tanzanian farmers to like learn technical farming skills from them and then share with them and reaffirm the cooperative practices that are actually largely on the continent. It's so crazy. Co-ops are actually what people use to start businesses, period. Like it's not like, oh, you grow into a co-op. It's you start as a co-op because that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so being able to go into the mountains and, you know, be in different villages and just listen to what folks are doing and be like, I wasn't going to teach anything. That's like a huge misnomer around like, oh, you're doing cooperative training. I actually was just going and listening to what folks were already doing and being like, okay, this is the terminology that people that are doing economic work are using. I was even able to point to in UN documents back in the 60s that they were saying cooperative economics will rid poverty in the world if we lean into this practice. You know, we've got this evidence that's so exciting. So I never thought about economics until co-ops, and then was like, oh, I can read some of this writing about economics and not feel like it's so outside of me, you know. I had an entrance language to come to it with. So I'm such a fangirl for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's coming to me now is I think Mariam Kaba has this quote, "Everything worthwhile is done with other people." And when I think about this work, and I even love, I think what Charlyn mentioned about like even coming into the language of and understanding as a language, I think about like I grew up in Chester, Pennsylvania, which is a very small city. And I mean, we were all sort of like one unplanned expense away from crisis, you know? And but at the same time, it took me a while to sort of like sit within that and see the ways that people came together to go about like comfort and supporting each other's needs by hook or crook, you know? So I remember like funny stories, like I remember in high school, right, where a friend of mine is getting suspended because he stole an extra cheesesteak from the lunch counter just to make sure someone who couldn't afford a cheesesteak had one, right? And it's like, and I look back on that moment, I'm like, food access in our communities is already an issue. And at the same time, it's interplay with this sort of like discipline and you know, exploitation. It just becomes something. So I grew up a little bit older, right? And now I go on to Villanova University, right? And it's like the Black population is like this big, right? And most of the Black folks who are there are working in maintenance, working in food services. So us Black folks on campus, by the time we got to junior year, we learned the trick. We know everybody that's working this. Like, why are we giving all these people some money when we're the ones who hold all the means of production on this campus in terms of how food is made? So we decided, hey, yo, we not buying no meal plan. We work here anyway. We're going to make sure that everybody got what they need. And I didn't know that was like a collective or a cooperative. Like, I didn't know what was happening there, but I knew that we were committed to supporting one another. Then I get older, I come back home, you know, folks, we got like our cars, right? And you got your check engine lights on, but you can't afford that mechanic for now. But you know you need that inspection sticker so you don't get pulled over. And you think about just the networks of support that are built from like a shared awareness of our systemic conditions, while also recognizing the sort of like abundance of strategies and opportunities and options that we're always sort of like generating. So when I think about the work that we do at the Robeson House, which is really like by hook or crook as well too. This is the 2020 was the first year we ever had a paid executive director in our organization's 35-year existence. And Jena Harris is our current ED. But like, it was because Black women whose labor was undervalued, certainly underpaid, came and held this place together, right? And I always think about honoring that collectivity. Sometimes it's called cooperatives, and I think the cooperatives has a certain way of bringing language to that structure, but I think there are cultural practices that are happening every day. Like I just went at my sister's-in-law's, and she said, I don't know how to cook small platters. I only know how to cook big plates. And I was just like, that is such that's a cultural practice. That's not like, that's something that just comes out of work. I think Tafari, who's another contributor, said, I know how to cook 10 eggs and 10 pancakes. You know what I'm saying? That's all I know how to do. I'm gonna cook 10 pancakes. So somebody got to come over and eat the rest of these pancakes. And I think about those practices that happen, that emerge in Black communities and Asian communities and many of our sort of like oppressed and marginalized communities that are about supporting the collective.
Free brunch programs started off of my food stamps. I was buying food with my food stamp card. And Black women all over this country are paying for their communities to eat off their food stamp cards every day.
Yeah, as I'm listening to everybody talk, and I think like you guys are all echoing like the same thing I'm just hearing, like pull from family, and like I'm one of like 5 children, 7 stepchildren. So like to me, as I'm hearing, and Dr. Jessica, you're presenting, I'm like, these are things that we've done. But my question is, then what is the benefit of that like formalization of like that kind of bringing it together under a structure? And I guess this is for anybody.
I think that the formalization just like helps other people understand, but like it's not they're not solid lines, you know, like they have to be like dotted lines, or, you know, they have to be able to expand and contract in the different moments, you know, so like, I don't know that there's really a benefit to being standardized, but I think there is a benefit to helping people understand that, like, how to get started, you know, or how, like, you know, whether they're a business who's shifting towards, like, you know, incorporating mutual aid into their model, or, you know, an individual, just, you know, understanding that they need help, they can't do it alone, like, you know, like, and like kind of move away from that like individual mindset to a collective one. You know, the reference to family and stuff like that, like these are things that we kind of grew up doing, not even thinking, you know, but you know, I think some people, like, people just need that sometimes to like understand it as a practice and integrate it into their lives. You know, I don't know if it's really a benefit though, because like Bunny Hop, we're an LLC, you know, doing like volunteer work, you know, everything that comes in goes back out. You know, and so we just do that because it's the easiest way, you know, to kind of just go through it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if there's a benefit or not, but I think there's an importance to like keep it fluid, you know, and, you know, keep it always thinking about how to be more inclusive and understand who you haven't reached yet, you know, in the work, for sure.
Maybe like a
And I-
naming. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dr. Jessica.
Yeah, I was going to say a couple things. The formalization sometimes provides protection
Yeah.
in a variety of ways. Sometimes it protects the relationships when you have some people who want to make trouble, right? And it defines the relationships and the rights and regulations, right? Sometimes it protects you sort of from the government and stuff, right? Because the government, quote unquote, understands the formal system better than the informal, right? So there are some levels that it's protective, as well as I think you were right, Gina, about helping people to understand what you're doing. But the thing that's, I guess, that's why also people would still say, but why formalize? Because formalization can also get you into trouble, right? For some of the Blacks, the minute you were formalized and named yourself as a co-op, that's when the whites who didn't want you to succeed would say, oh, there's a co-op, let's stop them, right? So it made you too visible and you got in trouble. So, you know, that's why I was kind of saying, yeah, it protects you, but only in certain ways, right? In other ways, but also because we live in a capitalist system, I think sometimes the protection is needed, but also sometimes the being more obvious can be a deficit, right? So there's like that balance, right? It protects you in some ways, especially because of the kind of society we live in, but it also then can be a detriment because of the society we live in. So I think people have to always balance that out. And that's part of this learning together. We didn't even really talk about all the different ways that people need to learn together and study together to even do this. But that's part of when you're doing the learning together and the studying together, that's part of what you kind of decide as a group. Is it worth it? Do we want or are the kinds of protections we need going to come from formalizing, or is formalizing just going to give us more trouble and we're better to keep it the way we are, right? And that sometimes you have to have an actual discussion about that. Or there's a lot of different, one thing I love about the co-op model is there's tons of different ways to do economic cooperation. And so again, talking it through, talking to each other, trying to figure out what is it you really want to do? How do you want to relate to each other? That helps you to figure out which of the models and structures to use. And some of them will be more formal than others. So that's sort of my answer, but you're right. It's hard to say, you know, why formalize when you see all this stuff that happens so naturally and seemingly so easily. But some things, yeah. And then especially with some regulations, like some food regulations and stuff. And there is a question about giving
Yeah.
food to the homeless. I don't know. I don't have an answer to it, but maybe somebody else does. But again, that having some level of regulation can help in those cases too.
I'm going to just iterate the question so the panels can hear it. But Yara asked, can anyone offer conversation about navigating the legalities or the legal barriers of distributing food to unhoused folks or just anybody really in terms of permitting and food safety regulations?
I mean, we had a few different, well, can I go back and then can I say one thing that I thought of? Just in terms of like historical precedents for that question of formalizing. I think Dr. Jessica brought up W.E.B. Du Bois and his work. And if for those that are familiar or that are not, but might go and look, Du Bois, the extent to which Du Bois was able to talk about what we were doing and create graphs and be so to expound upon, that actually got a lot of communities into trouble because he over explained. And so like, that's a thing, that's a tension to have with your groups, not just on the formalizing, but what you talk. My mom used to say, everything you see, you don't speak. You know, and there's like certain things that need to be strategic among the people that you're working with, where you say, actually, we're not going to talk about the fact that we do this, we're going to do it. And that's not something that we're going to share out, because I think in this moment of like people saying there needs to be transparency, 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 we're not taking into consideration survival for groups who are marked and who are targeted when they are, you know, growing something for themselves to, you know, help buck against what the system is doing. So I just wanted to like make a note of that too, because I think a lot of us think about coverage and how media and exposure, and sometimes what you're doing doesn't need that exposure. Like you need to like fall back and like really, you know, hunker down sometimes. So just saying that. But in terms of that legality around feeding people in public, I think that we've played with a lot of different techniques, like free brunch. We always had someone with catering insurance. And so when we would do large events, you know, we were able to take our policy. We used Flip, which is it's actually super affordable if you have a little bit of capital, or it's an amount, it's maybe like $350 or something. You can fundraise that small amount to get that coverage. And then anywhere you're gonna go and serve food, you can add it to your rider basically, so that you can be on site. You do need to be aware of and, you know, make sure that you're kind of following, also getting Safe Serve,
Serve Safe
Serve Safe
certified.
certified.
Yeah.
Having at least 1 or 2 people with that on deck. And yeah, like paying attention to, and I think that that's a thing that both of us really did. And that was all, again, while we were attracted to each other's practices, food practices, is that even though we knew we were feeding people who may be houseless, who may be hungry, who may be in need, it doesn't matter. You serve people only what you would eat. We're not doing largely canned items. We're not doing heavily processed foods. We're not doing throwaway food. That's never the way that we were or do work with food. If we're giving high quality, we're giving it as if people are paying, because in essence, they are contributing to who we are. They're making our dreams and visions come true by allowing us to be of service to them, you know? So I think quality is a very important standard to keep in order to keep yourself safe also while feeding, you know, lots of people.
Yeah, having good food handling practices is super important. Just like, you know, the fridges, you know,
Yes.
keeping them in temp,
Yeah.
you know, keeping them clean, wiped down, like those are the things that, you know, if someone's trying to pick you out and they see, they can, you know, call it out. But I haven't encountered any problem with giving away food, because usually those are concerns around selling food, you know. So, you know, keep the standards up. But, you know, if someone willingly accepts free food, I don't really know that anyone's gonna like come after anyone about it. It's more like, you know, getting a permit for the space that you're using, or like all the other things that they could catch you on.
Yeah. In Philadelphia, there are literally zones in the city, which I found out about when I did this project on our municipal plaza a few years ago, where we put in an installation for a farm. And after I was hired as the curator for programming, Chris came and did some programming with me there. One, what I did not know, because I was brought on after the farm was built, was that they displaced an entire houseless community on top of the municipal plaza, who then came back. And then we were told that the city, about 7 years prior, had made that zone a no service zone for houseless people. People were not allowed to serve food to the homeless on that plaza. So there we were with all this produce, all this food, taking up space, talking about food. They had me talking about food justice, Lord, and not able to feed people. And so it became a situation where we're out of it now. And so I can say it was just kind of like, I'm ordering food for folks. I don't care. Like, we're gonna make salads, make the food. Like, we're not gonna sit here on all this food and tell people, no, sorry. In front of the Philadelphia Free Library Central Branch, that whole courtyard right in front of the library used to be, when I moved to this city, used to be a distribution site. People would come up there with massive tables of food. That place was then marked as a no distribution site. So check your cities out for things like that. And you can either buck at it if it's a new thing and you're still seeing community members there that are expecting a distribution, or be careful and make sure that you are avoiding those particular sites. And it can just be a matter of going a couple of blocks down. But just so y'all know, municipalities do weird stuff like that.
Yeah.
Something Charlyn said that I really appreciated is that sometimes the initiatives benefit from being under radar, right? That we don't need the media attention. And I was just thinking about another place where co-ops kind of happen naturally with some complicated reasons as to why, because I don't want to get into wage equity, but childcare, right? Those are facilities that are not designed to attract as much attention as possible. That the daycare has to be accessible and safe, right? This is just like a running commentary with parents of, the best daycares don't look gorgeous. That's not a part of its mandate. So I'm just kind of thinking a little bit about the benefit of service and, Dr. Jessica, you mentioned servant leadership, and I love that, but that the beauty of it is in the service, but the service doesn't have to be beautiful, right? And I really think about just like in the Asian American community too, how showing up like that isn't about, it's really just in taking the enormous pleasure of serving each other, and really finding a way to making that act really joyful. I want to just do a time check and, let everybody know we probably got like 10-12 minutes left of audience energy, and, it's approaching dinner time, or some of us are eating off screen now. So just want to, put it out there, last comments, last thoughts. And I have a couple last thoughts, but I'll open it back up to everybody, including in the audience, if you have any burning questions.
I got a quick thing, and Dr. Gordon-Nembhard or Charlyn, I'm thinking of y'all if you could help me with this history, because the Free African Society in Philadelphia during the yellow fever pandemic of 1793. You have the white doctors who are basically saying that Black people are immune to this, disease, right? And basically pushing Black communities into harm's way. And the work of, there's probably so many others who are not on the record, but Richard Allen and Absalom Jones, as leaders of the Free African Society, are organizing, right, nurses and folks to do community care in our Black communities, to attend to people's health needs. And there's so much about that moment and that specific pandemic. And I think about today and the work of like, Ala Stanford and the Black Doctors Health Consortium. And I think I might have read it a little bit in Collective Courage, but help me out with this story, y'all. If y'all got something to add about the context of the role of the Free African Society as a mutual aid society working with Black communities in Philadelphia during the pandemic.
Dr. Jessica, do you want to take this or do you?
Or no, I was going to let you take it because actually, I don't think I said anything more than that. If I said even that much, I was going to talk more generally. So yeah, if you've got more details, do that. And then I was going to talk more generally about mutual aid societies and healthcare.
Sure. Well, so what's interesting is there's a white doctor that's kind of infamous here in Philadelphia by the name of Benjamin Rush. And he was an advisor to Stephen Girard back in the day as well. And there's a scholar here in Philadelphia, Ross Ben, who is in Germantown and who's done a lot of studying of Germantown history, including the White House in Germantown and kind of these, the weird kind of circles of the elite at that time. And Rush was among them. And Rush kind of took credit for, and I hear white scholars giving Rush credit for, the palliative care that Absalom Jones, Richard Allen, and the congregation of what's now Mother Bethel, AME, was providing to and among the Black community. So what I will say is like, yes, absolutely, that's what we were doing. Somebody mama came up with the idea and said, I'm gonna take soup down to Yamin, and it caught on, and that was what was happening. And, obviously we were still using all of the ointments and, treatments that, bush medicine that we had and that we were sharing. But what happens oftentimes in history is like, who gets credit because who has written the narrative? There is, however, really interesting just in terms of that, that pandemic, for folks that want to go and look more into what was written and kind of, I'm always going to tell people when they go to the archives, you have to read between the lines. You do your prayer practice so that you can hear the whispers, of who else was there and get those stories and those recipes too. But at the city archives on Spring Garden and like 8th Street, there is microfilm there. And actually out of Philadelphia, some of the first medical journals were printed at that time. That's when they started. And, it's tied to institutions who shall not be named, some Voldemort institutions that we know have done harm as well. But something that's really interesting is the documentation that has come out of it. So, there's microfilm that you can kind of go and kind of behold what was being said. The one other thing that I want to say is that Philadelphia is also one of the first places that had a quarantine hospital back in the day, and the Ganges Africans that are also documented as having been held in this quarantine hospital at the base of the Delaware River in what is called what is the name of the hospital? The Libretto Quarantine Hospital. So I will say that we also did that and nursed each other and cared for each other under those conditions, as well as the city understood that they wanted to do disease control. So.
Yeah, this stuff is fascinating. I don't have any details to add, but I did want to say one thing about the Free Africa Society and then one thing about mutual aid and health. So the other thing that's so fascinating to me about the Free Africa Society was it's officially the second Black mutual aid society in the country on, registered Black mutual aid society in the country. And so they were doing mutual aid before they founded the AME church, right? So I also often talk about, right, even the Black church, right, owes its roots to mutual aid and mutual aid societies So you can trace just all that relationship is really incredible. But the other thing is most of the mutual aid societies started out doing burial and health. Those were the first two things that they did, which also goes back to me about the cultural, and I mean, well, health is kind of survival too, but it's also, right, the cultural thing, especially the burial, right? African peoples had a notion of how their members should be buried. And of course, when you were enslaved and whatever, the master didn't give a hoot, right? And so these societies developed even among enslaved people, right, to make sure that they could bury their dead properly the way they wanted to. They needed to face toward the west, right? They had to be buried with an object, right? All kinds of things. And so, right, so some of the very first mutual aid was about, let's make sure to honor our dead in a way that honors our original culture. And we're going to make sure to do it no matter what our circumstances are. And so and then the next thing after honoring the dead is trying to make sure people had some health, right? Some healthcare and whatever. And so then again, pooling the resources to make sure, because we were obviously being abandoned, right, by the mainstream healthcare, right? Nobody cared about whether we lived or died or whatever. So it's really interesting also to think about those relationships and how, all that sort of solidarity and mutual whatever also really started around health in some ways, even though obviously food and other ways to share come right closely right behind it, and food has to do with health too. But I always thought it was fascinating that, the burial was really like the very first thing that a mutual aid society did.
Yeah, from the midwives to the burial.
Right. Yeah.
Womb to tomb, for
Womb
sure.
to tomb, absolutely. And again, making sure that the ways that we were dehumanized, that we rehumanized ourselves.
Yes.
Fought that dehumanization at every level in every possible way and did it together, right? By joining together to make sure to recognize our humanity and keep our humanness going.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow. I can feel my heart beating.
So much.
That's, oh my God. Yeah. Woof. Whew.
I have a question. I have a question about what people need today. What is something that you need today, or maybe this weekend, that you're going to lean on community or lean into community to receive?
I'm going to jump in and just say that we started by naming our ancestors and calling in folks who precede us, and in the other side. But I recently learned of a really untimely, really grisly death of a friend, and just it shut down everything. I mean, that was just 3 days where I couldn't do anything at all. My folks showed up, they took care of business. So, we were talking about transitions into and out of life. I can't even imagine a grieving process happening in isolation. And I know a lot of folks have been having to do that because of the pandemic for the last couple of years. And I'm really, really, really taking in a stock what it means when your brain and your heart just shut down, right? Who shows up. So I'm so grateful for people who came up and just reflecting a lot on that.
Thank you for sharing that.
I think one of the things that I need. So yesterday I'm getting off the bus, the 21 at 62nd Street, and Miss Ella, who's 89 years old, she's like, look at how messed up the sidewalks are over here. And from that, we start up this conversation. And Miss Ella's like, what do you do? I'm like, well, I work at this museum that's down the street, at 50th and Walnut. And she's like, and Miss Ella says, oh yeah, tell me about it. I really love having conversations with it like this, because in this moment, I'm 89 years old. I'm excited to have conversations with people because it keeps me active and it keeps my mind active. And so me and Miss Ella are sitting on the corner of 62nd and Walnut, having like a 20-minute conversation about the merits of this book project, her own history in West Philadelphia and the community that she came up in Northern Michigan and then spent some time in Canada, then makes our way here. And what I loved about it and what I miss is those like moments of recognition in community that I think, you know, in terms of this pandemic, we're all masked. You're not supposed to, those interactions of just like seeing one another, recognizing one another, and recognizing that we kind of need one another to stay active, to stay in each other's lives. And that like that collectivity is what keeps us going. So I'm thankful to Miss Ella for that. And then talk about what I need is more just like interrupted conversations like that. Just like, yeah, I'm gonna be on the porch, stop by, say what's up. You know what I'm saying? It was warm the other day. I don't think it's gonna be warm no more. So I had the speaker outside, but eventually we're gonna get back there. So what I need is that, you know what I mean? Community, people.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, I was gonna say rest, but then I was like, the only thing I need people for is to do everything. So, you know, sort of what like Anne said, though I wasn't grieving. But I just need people to take care of everything so I could just rest. But actually, I think Chris is right, you know, that missing people, you know, that the different kinds of interactions. So this, even though it's been on Zoom, has really uplifted me talking with all of you. It's just incredible. So I don't really need anything else this weekend now that I've had this conversation.
I think there's something, I think you might have said it when we opened, Charlyn, about it being like a spiritual practice, you know, the collective work and things. And that made me think about when my first year of doing Bunny Hop, I did it every Saturday, rain or shine. And I always like, Friday was like my quiet time to like, just kind of get centered and focus. And tomorrow is the beginning of a whole plethora of things that are happening. But tomorrow is like the first time I'll do a Saturday distro in a long time. You know, so I'm just excited for that. We're gonna be distributing food at a health fair in West Philly. You know, so I guess I'm just excited to lean back into that Saturday practice and have that time in the morning, picking up produce and filling up my car and going and unloading it and setting up. And, you know, I asked for what I needed extra hands, and, you know, I got that in return. So I have people like ready to come jump in and then give me the break that I need, you know, to be able to do it all again next week, you know. So I asked for the help and it's coming, and I'm really just looking forward to it. And this conversation, just like you said, Dr. Jessica, this conversation is kind of what I needed, you know, to move into the weekend. So yeah, I'm just really grateful.
I think everyone has said it. So I feel like I'm just repeating, but I think I needed two things. I think I needed inspiration, which I think this conversation has given me. And I too, like Chris, need that very like random human interaction. So I think I know what I'm doing Sunday, because I like saltfish. So I think I know how to get that. So I'm very, very grateful for this conversation.
And I'm gonna do a quick logistics plug too, because I got a text earlier today from my state rep and where we are, Rick Krajewski, and I know folks might know about the water main break off in King Sessing and the families and homes that were affected. And Rick texted me earlier, their office is looking for 2 to 3 volunteers that will be down to help pick up and drop off donations for folks who've been affected by the King Sessing water main break. 2-hour time commitment. If they're able to, they can meet Rick at the 4712 Baltimore Avenue office tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. They'll provide transport to and back. So if you are looking for opportunity to, you know, serve, and, defend, people's lives and the resources that they need. Go to 4712 Baltimore Avenue tomorrow at 10:30 to serve the families in King Sessom.
Thanks, Chris.
So the question from the chat is, what do you need, Charlyn?
Oh, I need to drink water. And tomorrow I am going to be cutting 10 pounds of onions, lots of celery, tomatoes. I would be down for like a couple of people to slide in my DMs and offer to come help chop vegetables. I would be down for that.
I like how sexy you made that sound.
Oh, thank you.
Slip into my DMs.
You don't lie. I'm telling you, this cooperative economic thing is sexy. That was one other thing that I forgot. It was a note that I meant to make, is like, the more that we meme this cooperative stuff, like, yo, the kids are loving it. The children are ready to be cooperators.
No.
They can't wait to establish their own free town, okay? They're buying up
Absolutely.
land. They are farmers. They are doulas.
Yes.
So the generation coming up behind us are hot and ready for
Mhm.
ecumenical societies. They're ready. And
Yeah.
I'm so
Yeah.
excited and here for
Wonderful.
it.
It's so wonderful. There was a study once that found that people who cooperate have higher endorphins than people who don't, and that women cooperators have higher endorphins than men cooperators.
Wow.
But somehow we just don't connect to that, right? It's part of that being
Hmm.
alienated from our own bodies, right?
Wow.
That we don't recognize it. Well, some of us do. I definitely get my endorphins from cooperating.
You heard it here. Mutual aids are an aphrodisiac. That's great. I'm dying to make an orgy joke being a kind of co-op, but somebody else can write it.
It is Friday night. I understand.
It's a solidarity activity. How about that? It's a solidarity activity.
I mean, we should definitely give a shout out to Red Umbrella, our sex
Yes.
workers.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Sex workers co-ops. Yes.
Right.
Yes. I'm so glad you named them, Chris. And on that note, in the spirit of also integrated, sort of collaborative, multi-hyphenate everything, I just want to name one more time how excited I am as Asian Arts Initiative to invite a group of Black revolutionaries, really, in the way that we're thinking about collective systems and communities and cooperatives, and how deeply honored I am in that we get to witness it and cooperate. And again, sometimes it is just being in the same room, and sometimes it's being on the front line and in service with you. So I'm really, really honored to have hosted this event on behalf of Asian Arts Initiative.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for putting us together. This has been fabulous.
Yeah,
Very much.
thank you. I'm going to culminate. This is it. We're going to start the wind down and send ourselves into, yes, I'm seeing hearts and bunnies and excitement in the chat room. This is great. We'll all connect and we'll all slip into Charlyn's DMs. And invitations wide open, it looks like. And that goes, I think, for all of us. Thank you so much. This recording will go up, so please share the word. And yes, so much gratitude. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Good night.
Night.